Step into the unknown with True Stories of Bigfoot, an unsettling journey into the woods, where reality feels thin and the shadows seem to move on their own. Every story begins the same way. Someone ventures into the quiet parts of nature, expecting nothing more than a peaceful hike or a night under the stars. But what they find instead challenges their understanding of the world. These are the accounts from people who insist they saw something impossible yet unmistakably real, a towering creature with intelligence in its eyes and power in every step. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, the stories shared by hikers, hunters, campers, and unsuspecting families may just nudge you toward the idea that the legendary creature might be far more than a myth. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a park ranger stationed deep within a national forest known for its vast, untouched wilderness. He wasn't a man prone to superstition or exaggeration. Years of working in the backcountry had made him comfortable with bears, wolves, and the strange noises of the night. But one evening during a late patrol, he heard footsteps pacing him from within the tree line. At first, he assumed it was a large animal, but the footsteps matched his stride perfectly, slow when he slowed, quiet when he paused, and steadily pursuing when he continued walking. When he finally shone his flashlight into the forest, the beam caught a pair of eyes, much higher than where a bear's eyes would be, and far closer together. They blinked once, reflecting a deep amber glow, before disappearing behind a tree wider than a small car. The ranger stood frozen. He knew in his gut that what he saw was not something described in any wildlife guide. He reported it only to his closest colleague, who responded with a quiet nod and admitted he had seen the same thing years earlier, and never forgot the feeling of being watched by something that understood him more than an animal should. Another encounter comes from a pair of hunters who set out at dawn in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. Their goal was elk, but what they found was something that made both of them drop their rifles in pure shock. They had just crossed a shallow creek when they noticed a line of enormous footprints pressed deep into the mud, far too wide and long to belong to a human, yet unmistakably shaped like a bare foot with 5 distinct toes. They followed the tracks upstream for several minutes until they heard a branch snap with the force of a tree falling. Turning instinctively, both men saw a dark silhouette step between 2 fir trees. It was tall, easily over 8 feet, broad-shouldered, and covered in coarse, dark hair. The figure paused, tilted its head slightly as if studying them, then turned and walked away effortlessly, moving with a grace and silence that contradicted its enormous size. For experienced hunters who prided themselves on identifying any creature by sound or shape, the encounter shook their confidence to the core. Neither had ever felt so small in the forest. They left immediately, abandoning their hunting plans and returning to camp in complete silence. Some of the most unsettling encounters happen not in the deep wilderness but closer to home. One family living in a rural cabin described nights filled with strange knocks on the exterior walls, slow, deliberate knocks, always just after midnight. At first, they blamed raccoons or even mischievous teenagers, but the knocks grew louder and more rhythmic. One night, the father decided he had enough. When the knocking started again, he threw open the back door with a flashlight in hand. The beam caught something massive standing just beyond the edge of the porch light, a towering figure covered in thick hair, its shoulders as wide as a refrigerator. The creature stood completely still, watching him with dark, reflective eyes. Neither moved for several seconds. Then, without a sound, the creature stepped backward and melted into the darkness as though it had never been there. For weeks after, the family heard heavy footsteps circling the property at night, the sound of branches breaking, and occasionally the low rumble of something breathing just outside the bedroom windows. Eventually, they moved away, leaving the cabin behind with no intention of returning. Campers often report the eeriest stories of all, perhaps because the isolation of a campsite combined with the vast darkness of the forest amplifies every strange sound. One group of friends camping near a remote lake recalled a night when they heard what sounded like a woman wailing somewhere in the woods, long, drawn-out cries that echoed across the water. Worried someone might be injured, 2 of them grabbed lanterns and headed toward the source. But the further they walked, the more the wailing changed. It became deeper, more guttural, more like something struggling to imitate a human voice rather than a person in distress. When the sound suddenly cut off, they froze. Another heavy sound followed, the unmistakable thump of something large dropping to the forest floor. Then came the footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling them in the darkness just beyond the reach of their lanterns. They didn't wait to see what made the sound. They sprinted back to camp, threw everything they could into their truck, and sped away, hearing a final echo of that eerie, not quite human scream as they drove off into the night. Some encounters are less frightening and more mysterious, leaving witnesses unsure whether they saw something dangerous or simply extraordinary. A father and his young daughter were hiking along a river when they spotted what they initially thought was a large bear standing upright on a boulder. But bears don't turn their heads the way this creature did, smoothly, intelligently, as if curious. When it noticed them watching, it crouched down, placing one long arm on the rock for balance. The father later described its movements as shockingly human-like, far more so than any animal he had ever seen. His daughter whispered that she thought it was a forest giant, a phrase she'd never used before. As the creature moved away, it didn't run or lumber but instead walked along the riverbank in long, powerful strides, vanishing behind a thick curtain of pine trees. The father never reported the sighting, afraid he'd be laughed at or questioned, but he never forgot the strange calmness he felt during the encounter, like the creature was simply passing by, not threatening, just existing in a world that rarely intersects with ours. Even more unnerving are the accounts from people who hear things rather than see them. Deep woods hikers report the sound of heavy breathing trailing behind them, or large branches snapping from trees that show no wind. Some hear whistles, sharp, clear whistles that sound like a signal from one unseen creature to another. Others describe the horrifying experience of hearing their own voices mimicked back to them from the forest. One man swears he heard something call his name in his own exact tone, even though he was completely alone. He later discovered that several reported encounters include this bizarre mimicry, as if the creature studies human speech and attempts to reproduce it with unsettling accuracy. But not all stories describe fear. Some people report moments of awe, where they felt honored or humbled just to witness something so extraordinary. A woman hiking alone at dusk once described seeing a figure walking along a ridge, silhouetted by the pink glow of sunset. It didn't hide or run. Instead, it paused, turning its head as though acknowledging her. She didn't feel frightened, only small, like she was witnessing something ancient and wild that didn't belong to the modern world. She watched it disappear into the trees, and for the rest of the hike, she felt a sense of peace rather than fear. What makes these stories compelling is not just the descriptions of the creature, but the consistency of the emotions felt by the witnesses, the primal fear, the sense of being watched, the overwhelming certainty that what they encountered was real. Many of the people who share these stories are not dreamers or conspiracy theorists. They are outdoorsmen, professionals, parents, and everyday individuals who entered the woods believing in what they knew, and left questioning everything. As more encounters surface, one thing becomes clear: the legend of Bigfoot endures because something about these stories resonates deeply with us. Maybe it's the idea that the world still holds mysteries we haven't explained or creatures we haven't catalogued. Maybe it's the fear that we are not alone in the deepest parts of nature. Or maybe, just maybe, the line between myth and reality is far thinner than we thought. And as you listen to these stories, imagine yourself standing in the silent forest, the wind brushing through the trees, the darkness stretching endlessly between the trunks. You hear a distant branch snap. Footsteps approach, slow, heavy, deliberate. Something watches from the shadows, unseen yet undeniably present. If you heard those footsteps, saw those eyes, or felt that overwhelming sense that something intelligent was following you, would you still believe Bigfoot is only a legend? Watch till the end, you might just start believing.